Deep in the forests, hidden beneath the waves, lurking in the shadows, creatures that shouldn't exist. Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, Mokele-Mbembe. For centuries, humans have reported encounters with mysterious animals that science says cannot be real. But what if these legends aren't pure fantasy? What if behind every cryptid lies a kernel of truth, a misidentified animal, or a very real creature just waiting to be discovered? Tonight, we explore the fascinating boundary between myth and reality, where folklore meets biology and where the impossible sometimes becomes possible. Cryptozoology, from the Greek kryptos meaning hidden, is the study of animals whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated. These creatures, called cryptids, occupy a strange space between legend and zoology. Some cryptozoologists are serious researchers investigating wildlife mysteries. Others chase sensational claims with little scientific rigor. The field remains controversial, dismissed by mainstream science, yet captivating to millions worldwide. But it's important to remember that cryptozoology has occasionally succeeded. The mountain gorilla, the giant squid, the okapi and the coelacanth were all considered cryptids before they were scientifically verified. This history reminds us that unknown animals do exist, that indigenous knowledge often precedes scientific discovery, and that nature still holds some incredible surprises. So why do these cryptid legends persist, even without much physical evidence? Psychology offers some compelling answers. Humans are basically pattern recognition machines, and sometimes we see patterns that aren't actually there, a phenomenon called pareidolia. It's why we see faces in clouds, figures in shadows, and monsters in ambiguous shapes. Then there's confirmation bias, which leads believers to interpret any new information as support for their views, while dismissing anything that contradicts them. Social reinforcement within cryptid communities also strengthens belief. And let us not forget fear and wonder, two powerful emotions that make cryptid encounters memorable and highly shareable stories. Cryptids also fulfill certain psychological needs. They bring mystery into a world that can feel over-explained, connect us to nature, and offer a way to rebel against scientific authority. Understanding these psychological factors doesn't prove cryptids are false, but it does help explain why these legends endure regardless of the quality of the evidence. Of course, many cryptid sightings are simply cases of misidentifying known animals. A bear walking on its hind legs becomes Bigfoot. A floating log becomes a lake monster. An unfamiliar animal seen in poor lighting becomes a Chupacabra. Things like distance, weather, fear, and our own expectations can all distort our perception. Our brains are wired to fill in the gaps in sensory information with what we expect to see, creating experiences that feel absolutely real but might not be. And then there are the hoaxes, which complicate things even more. The famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film, the surgeon's photograph of Nessie, the Minnesota Iceman, all are controversial. Some have been proven to be fakes, while others are still debated. Hoaxes have all sorts of motivations, from profit and entertainment to simply testing how gullible people are. Distinguishing genuine mysteries from misidentification and fraud requires critical thinking, careful evaluation of the evidence, and a healthy dose of intellectual humility. Most cryptid reports probably have ordinary explanations, but maybe, just maybe, not all of them do. Long before Western cryptozoology ever existed, indigenous peoples worldwide had their own legends of mysterious creatures. Native American cultures describe Sasquatch, Aboriginal Australians speak of bunyips, African tribes tell stories of Mokele-Mbembe, Tibetan people know of the Yeti. Skeptics often dismiss these as mere folklore, but that perspective can be culturally arrogant. Indigenous knowledge systems have preserved accurate information about local ecology for generations. When indigenous people consistently describe specific creatures in specific locations, dismissing their accounts seems premature. Scientific history is full of examples where Western science eventually confirmed what indigenous knowledge had been saying all along. The real challenge is to separate the metaphorical and spiritual elements from the literal ones in these accounts. Respectful collaboration between indigenous communities and researchers might just be the key to unlocking some of these cryptid mysteries. But how many species are even out there left to find? Scientists estimate that somewhere between 2 million and 50 million species exist on Earth, but we've only formally described about 2 million of them. New species are being discovered constantly, thousands every single year. Now, most of them are small, insects, microbes, strange deep-sea creatures, but large animals are occasionally found too. The saola, a forest-dwelling bovine, was discovered in Vietnam in 1993. The Omura's whale was confirmed as a distinct species in 2003. If large mammals like these can hide from science until so recently, what else might be out there? There are vast regions that remain underexplored: the deep oceans, dense rainforests, remote mountains, and vast cave systems. These are all places that could harbor unknown animals. So the question isn't whether undiscovered animals exist. They absolutely do. The real question is whether any of them match the descriptions of cryptids. Probability suggests most are misidentifications, but discovering even one would be a huge vindication for cryptozoology. Some cryptids might also be relict populations, survivors of species thought to be extinct. Take the coelacanth, a fish believed to have died out 66 million years ago, which was discovered alive and well in 1938, or the Laotian rock rat, previously known only from fossils, which was found living in 2005. These are called Lazarus species, named after the biblical figure who returned from the dead, and they prove that extinction isn't always the end of the story. Could thylacines or Tasmanian tigers still survive in Tasmania despite being declared extinct in 1936? Might ivory-billed woodpeckers persist in remote swamps, even with no confirmed sightings since the 1940s? Could Mokele-Mbembe be a surviving sauropod dinosaur? That last one seems pretty implausible. Dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago, but stranger things have happened. Evolution and extinction are more complex than we think. Isolated populations in stable environments might just persist long after their species has supposedly vanished. The mass media plays a powerful role in amplifying cryptid legends. Tabloid newspapers sensationalize sightings to sell copies. TV shows like Finding Bigfoot and Monster Quest often prioritize entertainment over hard evidence. And social media can spread alleged cryptid footage around the world in an instant, usually without any verification. This media ecosystem rewards sensational claims and often punishes skeptical analysis. Compelling stories go viral, regardless of how true they are. Blurry photographs and shaky videos become evidence simply through repetition, not because of their quality. The media also shapes what we expect to see, creating a feedback loop. After a new monster movie comes out, sightings of similar creatures often increase. This doesn't mean all reports are media-inspired fabrications, but it makes separating genuine observations from media-influenced experiences nearly impossible. The cryptid phenomenon exists, at least in part, in our collective imagination, sustained by the stories we tell each other. For understandable reasons, mainstream science remains overwhelmingly skeptical of cryptids. The old saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And frankly, blurry photos, ambiguous footprints, and eyewitness testimony just don't meet the scientific standard of proof. No cryptid has ever produced a body, a skeleton, or an unambiguous DNA sample. For large animals to exist in the numbers reported, without leaving behind any physical evidence, seems highly implausible. Population genetics requires a minimum viable population to survive, which means there have to be multiple breeding individuals. So where are the bodies? Where is the scat, the DNA, the definitive proof? Scientists also point out that many cryptid reports describe creatures that are biologically implausible. They rear too large for their habitat, they lack an evolutionary context, or they defy what we know about anatomy and physiology. Skepticism isn't the same as being closed-minded. It just means requiring sufficient evidence before accepting a claim. Science follows the evidence, and for cryptids, that compelling evidence remains absent. Cryptids occupy that fascinating borderland between belief and evidence, folklore and zoology, mystery and explanation. Each cryptid tells multiple stories about human psychology, cultural traditions, media influence, and just occasionally, genuine biological mysteries. As we journey through the most famous cryptids from around the world, we'll explore the real animals, the historical events, and the psychological factors that might explain these enduring legends. Some explanations might be disappointing, others will surprise you, and perhaps a few mysteries will remain unsolved, reminding us that our world still contains unexplored corners. Let us begin with the most famous cryptid of all, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the wild man of the woods. This towering, hairy, ape-like creature has captured the American imagination for centuries. Described as 7 to 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with footprints over 16 inches long, Bigfoot allegedly roams the forests of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Thousands of sightings have been reported, countless footprints have been found, yet no body, no bones, no DNA has ever confirmed its existence. So, what is Bigfoot? An undiscovered primate? A case of mass hysteria? Or something in between? Long before European settlers arrived, indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest spoke of Sasquatch, from the Salish word Sasquatch, meaning wild man. Different tribes had different names and interpretations. Some viewed Sasquatch as physical creatures, others as spiritual beings, and many as both. The Coast Salish, Lummi, Spokane, and numerous other tribes incorporated these beings into their worldviews. Some stories describe Sasquatch as harmless forest dwellers, while others paint them as dangerous kidnappers, particularly of children. The consistency of these accounts across cultures suggests either a shared cultural archetype or the observation of something real. Anthropologists debate whether these legends reflect actual encounters with bears, misidentified humans, or a genuine unknown primate. Indigenous elders often resist the cryptozoological appropriation of their traditions, noting that Western cryptid hunters fundamentally misunderstand the spiritual and cultural context. October 20th, 1967. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding horses through Bluff Creek, California, searching for Bigfoot. They claimed to encounter a female Bigfoot, which Patterson captured on film for 59 seconds. The footage shows a large, hairy, bipedal creature walking away from the camera, briefly looking back, then disappearing into the forest. This film became the most famous piece of cryptid evidence ever recorded. Believers cite the creature's muscle movement and natural gait as proof of authenticity. Skeptics argue it's obviously a person in a costume, pointing to unnatural proportions and suspicious circumstances. Attempts to prove or disprove the film have continued for over 50 years. Bob Gimlin maintained until his death that the encounter was genuine. Whether hoax or history, the Patterson-Gimlin film shaped the Bigfoot legend forever. Bigfoot's name comes from the enormous footprints allegedly left by the creature, typically 16 to 24 inches long. Thousands of footprint casts have been collected over the decades. Believers point to consistent anatomical details, dermal ridges similar to fingerprints, a flexible mid-foot break unlike human feet, and distinct weight distribution patterns. Some prints even show scarring across multiple impressions, suggesting they came from the same individual. However, skeptics note that footprints are easily faked. Ray Wallace, a logging company owner, confessed before his death to creating fake Bigfoot prints in the 1950s using large wooden feet. His hoaxes likely sparked the modern Bigfoot phenomenon. While not all prints are hoaxes, telling the genuine from the fabricated is nearly impossible without the creature that made them. Alleged Bigfoot vocalizations have also been recorded, most famously the Sierra Sounds from the 1970s. These recordings capture supposed Bigfoot communication, howls, screams, wood knocks, and chattering sounds. Audio analysis shows some calls fall outside the normal human vocal range, reaching very low frequencies. Primatologists comparing the sounds to known great ape vocalizations find both similarities and differences. Of course, skeptics argue the sounds could be known animals, like bears, mountain lions, or owls, distorted by distance or weather. Humans can also produce remarkable vocal variations, making hoaxing possible. The biggest challenge with audio evidence is the lack of visual confirmation. Sounds alone can't identify the source. Still, the consistent patterns in these audio reports are intriguing. So, what could people be seeing? The most common explanation for Bigfoot sightings is misidentified bears. Black bears and grizzlies live in Bigfoot territory, and they do occasionally walk upright, especially when curious or trying to get a better view. An upright bear seen through foliage at a distance in poor light by a startled witness could easily be mistaken for a bipedal humanoid. Bears are the right size, the right color, and in the right places. This explanation accounts for many sightings, but it doesn't quite fit them all. Experienced outdoorsmen claim they can recognize a bear and insist their Bigfoot encounters were different. Bears don't walk upright for long distances or move with the fluid bipedal gait described in many reports. The bear hypothesis likely explains some sightings, but probably not all. Some cryptozoologists propose that Bigfoot is a descendant of Gigantopithecus, a massive extinct ape that lived in Asia until about 100,000 years ago. Gigantopithecus blacki stood up to 10 feet tall and weighed up to 1,200 pounds, making it the largest known ape ever. The theory suggests that Gigantopithecus crossed the Bering Land Bridge during an ice age and established a population in North America. This would make Bigfoot a relict population of a supposedly extinct ape. It's a romantic idea, but it has serious problems. We have zero fossil evidence of Gigantopithecus in the Americas. And again, where are the bodies? The Gigantopithecus hypothesis remains pure speculation without any supporting evidence. It's also important to consider the social and economic factors at play. Bigfoot provides real economic benefits to certain communities. Towns like Willow Creek, California, promote Bigfoot tourism with festivals, museums, and tours. This incentive encourages keeping the legend alive regardless of the evidence. Businesses profit from Bigfoot merchandise, and TV shows generate revenue from Bigfoot content. This doesn't prove Bigfoot is fake, but it does create pressure to maintain belief. Psychologically, Bigfoot also provides identity and community. Believers form social networks and share experiences. Understanding these social and economic dimensions helps explain why the legend persists, independent of the quality of the evidence. Contemporary Bigfoot research uses increasingly sophisticated methods. Trail cameras are deployed in forests, capturing millions of wildlife images. Environmental DNA sampling collects genetic material from soil and water, searching for unknown primate DNA. Drones and thermal imaging survey the wilderness. Despite these advances, compelling evidence remains elusive. Trail cameras photograph thousands of bears, deer, and other animals, but never Bigfoot. eDNA studies identify known species but no unknown primates. This absence of evidence becomes increasingly problematic for Bigfoot proponents. As technology improves, the failure to document Bigfoot suggests it's either remarkably elusive or simply not there. The field's credibility has also been damaged by multiple confirmed hoaxes. There were Ray Wallace's fake footprints in the 50s, the fake Bigfoot body unveiled in 2008, which was just a gorilla suit filled with animal parts, and Rick Dyer's 2012 hoax, another rubber suit. These hoaxes grab media attention, temporarily fool believers, and then get exposed, embarrassing the whole field of cryptozoology. The prevalence of hoaxes means every piece of Bigfoot evidence has to be scrutinized skeptically. The problem is, hoaxers can create very convincing fakes, making it incredibly difficult to tell what, if anything, might be authentic. The scientific consensus is that Bigfoot almost certainly doesn't exist as described. The complete absence of physical remains is a huge red flag. Large animals leave bones behind. A breeding population would require hundreds of individuals, and to find zero evidence in an era of ubiquitous cameras seems implausible. Most reported evidence has logical explanations, misidentified bears, hoaxes, and psychological factors. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying. Perception is fallible. The Bigfoot legend likely arose from indigenous traditions, was amplified by mid-century hoaxes, and persists today through psychology and economics rather than biology. Until a body appears, science reasonably concludes that Bigfoot is a myth, and yet Bigfoot endures. New sightings continue to be reported. Believers remain convinced. Why? Bigfoot represents wilderness, mystery, and the possibility that something wild and free still exists beyond our control. The legend offers adventure, community, and purpose. And perhaps most importantly, you can't definitively disprove it. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, believers argue. As long as wilderness exists, the possibility remains, however remote, that our world still holds wonders. Bigfoot may be America's most famous cryptid, but across the Atlantic, another legendary creature captures imaginations: the Loch Ness Monster. Nessie, as she's affectionately known, supposedly inhabits Scotland's deep, dark waters, a prehistoric survivor in a modern loch. Like Bigfoot, Nessie has devoted believers, alleged evidence, and skeptical explanations. Let us journey to Scotland's Highlands and explore the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster. Loch Ness, a long, deep freshwater lake in the Scottish Highlands, formed by ancient glaciers. Its dark waters plunge to depths of over 700 feet, holding more fresh water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. And allegedly, it holds something else: a large, unidentified creature described as having a long neck, small head, and humped back. Thousands have claimed to see it. Millions hope to. But does the Loch Ness Monster actually exist? Or is Nessie Scotland's most profitable myth? Legends of a monster in Loch Ness predate modern sightings by centuries. The first documented account comes from a biography of Saint Columba, written around 565 AD. According to the text, the saint encountered a water beast attacking a man in the river Ness. Saint Columba commanded the beast to retreat, and it obeyed. Believers cite this as early evidence, but skeptics point out that stories about saints often included miracles for spiritual, not historical purposes. Medieval texts described water beasts all over Europe, but they were usually seen as dragons or demons, not real animals. Still, this story shows that Loch Ness has been linked with aquatic mystery for over 1400 years. The most iconic image of Nessie is the surgeon's photograph from 1934, which shows a long neck and small head rising from the loch. For decades, this photo was treated as powerful evidence, shaping how the world imagined the monster. But in 1994, the truth came out. It was a hoax. One of the creators confessed they had built a fake monster, using a toy submarine with a sculpted head and neck. A respectable doctor, Robert Kenneth Wilson, took the picture to lend it credibility. The hoax fooled millions for 60 years, and its revelation was a huge blow to Nessie's credibility. If the most famous evidence was fake, what could be trusted? It serves as a powerful reminder to be skeptical of photographic evidence. Many Nessie sightings describe a creature resembling a plesiosaur, a marine reptile that went extinct 66 million years ago. The long neck, small head, and bulky body are a striking match. Believers suggest a small group of plesiosaurs somehow survived in Loch Ness. However, this theory has major problems. Plesiosaurs were air-breathing ocean dwellers, while Loch Ness is a freshwater lake. They would need to surface often, yet constant sightings don't happen. Most importantly, Loch Ness only formed about 10,000 years ago, long after the dinosaurs disappeared, so there was no loch for a plesiosaur to get trapped in. The plesiosaur theory is romantic, but it falls apart when you look at the science. Over the years, Loch Ness has been scoured with modern technology. Sonar surveys, like the huge Operation Deep Scan in 1987, have swept the loch from end to end. While some sonar contacts detected large, moving objects, these could have been schools of fish, floating logs, or even equipment glitches. Underwater cameras have been sent down, but they've only captured murky water and the occasional fish. In 2003, a massive BBC search used 600 sonar beams and satellite navigation to cover the entire loch. They found nothing. While it's not impossible for a creature to avoid detection, the complete lack of evidence from these extensive searches makes it increasingly likely there is simply nothing large and unknown down there. So what are people seeing? Skeptics offer several plausible explanations. Large sturgeon, which can grow over 10 feet long and have a prehistoric look, sometimes enter the loch from the sea. A surfacing sturgeon could easily be mistaken for a monster. Another idea is giant eels. An environmental DNA study in 2019 found a lot of eel DNA in the loch, raising the possibility of unusually large specimens. Other simple explanations include floating logs, the wake from a boat, or even a swimming deer with its head and neck above the water. These ideas might not be as exciting as a monster, but they fit the evidence much better. Most Nessie sightings are likely just misinterpretations of ordinary things. Thousands of people swear they've seen the Loch Ness Monster, but eyewitness testimony can be unreliable. Our memories aren't perfect recordings. They can be influenced by our expectations and emotions. If you go to Loch Ness hoping to see a monster, you're more likely to interpret a weird wave or a floating log as one. Judging distance and size over water is also notoriously difficult. Plus, sightings are almost always brief, lasting just a few seconds, not long enough for a clear look. By the time someone gets a camera ready, it's gone. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying, but it does show that even a sincere belief isn't the same as an accurate observation. Whether real or not, the Loch Ness Monster is a huge economic asset for the Scottish Highlands. Tourists from all over the world flock to the area, hoping for a glimpse of Nessie. They spend money on hotels, boat tours, souvenirs, and museum tickets. The legend supports a whole industry. This creates a powerful incentive to keep the mystery alive. Debunking Nessie could actually hurt the local economy. This doesn't mean the monster is a deliberate conspiracy, but it helps explain why the legend is so resilient, even without solid evidence. As an unsolved mystery, Nessie is far more valuable than as a solved non-existence. So why would someone fake a Nessie sighting? The reasons vary. The man behind the surgeon's photograph did it for revenge after newspapers made fun of him for a failed monster hunt. Others have done it for attention, money, or just for a laugh. Nessie fever really took off in the 1930s when a new road made the loch more accessible and media hype created an expectation for sightings. With so many proven hoaxes over the years, it becomes very difficult to tell what, if anything, might be genuine. Without a body, a bone, or a clear, verifiable video, any new evidence will always be clouded by the possibility of another prank. Loch Ness isn't the only place with a monster legend. Reports of mysterious lake creatures come from all over the globe. In North America, there's Champ in Lake Champlain and Ogopogo in Canada. This global pattern suggests one of two things. Either there are undiscovered aquatic creatures in lakes worldwide, or humans have a universal tendency to imagine monsters in deep, dark water. The murky depths conceal the unknown, sparking our imagination. These legends might serve a similar purpose in different cultures, explaining mysteries and connecting us to the wilder side of nature. Scientists generally favor the folklore explanation, as most of these lakes simply can't support a large predator. In the end, the mainstream scientific community agrees. The Loch Ness Monster almost certainly does not exist. The loch doesn't have enough food to support a population of large predators. A breeding group would need dozens of animals, yet not one has ever been definitively found dead or alive. No bones, no carcasses, nothing. The loch's geological history rules out a trapped prehistoric creature. Plus, the economic incentives and a long history of hoaxes cast doubt on all the supposed evidence. The scientific verdict is clear. Nessie is a legend, not a living animal. And yet, the legend of Nessie endures. The monster has become a beloved symbol of Scotland. The story represents a sense of wonder, mystery, and the hope that there are still unexplained things in our world. In a world that often feels fully explored, Nessie's dark waters symbolize a final frontier between what we know and what we can imagine. Whether a real creature exists is almost beside the point. The legend survives because it speaks to our deep-seated need for adventure and possibility, something that pure facts can't always provide. From Scotland's deep lochs, we now journey to the highest peaks of the Himalayas, where another legendary creature is said to roam, the Yeti, or the Abominable Snowman. This ape-like being supposedly inhabits the harsh mountain environment, leaving mysterious footprints in the snow. The Yeti shares similarities with Bigfoot, but its home is a world away. What secrets lie behind the Himalayan legends? Let us climb into the thin air and explore. The Yeti, the Abominable Snowman, the Mokele. This legendary creature is said to stalk the Himalayan mountains, a vast snowy wilderness spanning Nepal, Tibet, and Bhutan. Descriptions paint a picture of a large, ape-like creature walking on two legs, covered in either reddish-brown or stark white fur. Its supposed home is above the tree line, one of the most unforgiving environments on our planet. For centuries, the Sherpa and Tibetan people have passed down stories of the Yeti. Then, in the early 20th century, Western mountaineers brought these tales back home, sparking global fascination. But is there truly an unknown primate surviving in the Himalayas? Or is the Yeti just a myth born from the mountains themselves? In Sherpa and Tibetan cultures, the relationship with the Migoi, or wild man, is deeply complex. It's not a simple monster story. Some traditions speak of three different types: a large, aggressive beast, a medium-sized animal, and even a small monkey-like being. For many, the Yeti isn't a biological creature at all, but a spiritual entity, a guardian of the mountains. You can see creatures resembling the Yeti in ancient monastery artwork. Oral traditions are filled with encounters, but they often carry spiritual or moral lessons, not just zoological details. Some Sherpa communities hold the Yeti in sacred regard. Western fascination often oversimplifies these rich traditions, turning a complex cultural figure into a simple, undiscovered ape, which can misrepresent these indigenous worldviews. The real question isn't just what the Yeti is biologically, but what it means culturally. The West really started paying attention to the Yeti, thanks to early 20th century mountaineering expeditions. In 1921, members of a British Everest expedition found huge footprints at about 21,000 feet. The expedition leader thought they were from a large wolf, but the Sherpa guides called the creature Metokangmi, meaning man-bear snowman. A newspaper columnist, Henry Newman, mistranslated this as the Abominable snowman, and the name stuck, capturing the public's imagination. More expeditions reported sightings and found more footprints. In 1951, mountaineer Eric Shipton took a now famous photo of a mysterious track in the snow about 13 inches long. These early reports cemented the Yeti's place in Western lore, but they were all based on indirect evidence: footprints, distant glimpses, and local stories. No one had a body, a clear photo, or any real proof. Those footprint photos are the cornerstone of the Yeti legend. The most famous, taken by Eric Shipton in 1951 on the Menlung Glacier, show large, seemingly human-like tracks. Believers point to what they see as anatomical details, like pressure ridges that would be hard to fake. But skeptics have a simpler explanation: snow melts. As the sun beats down, the edges of a track can melt and distort, making it look much larger and obscuring the original shape. A bear walking in its own tracks can create a pattern that looks like a bipedal gait. Even a mountaineer's boot, photographed at just the right angle, could be misinterpreted. Scientific analysis of supposed Yeti prints usually concludes they belong to known animals, are distorted human prints, or are just too ambiguous to identify. Like with Bigfoot, footprints alone just aren't enough to prove anything. But what about physical relics? Several Himalayan monasteries claim to have Yeti scalps, hands, and bones. For years, these were revered as sacred objects. In the 1950s and 60s, scientists finally got to examine some of them. Sir Edmund Hillary's 1960 expedition famously studied a supposed Yeti scalp from the Kumjung monastery. The verdict? It was made from the skin of a sero, a local goat antelope. Other alleged Yeti hands were found to be crafted from various animal parts or even human remains. More recently, in 2014, DNA analysis of supposed Yeti hair and bone samples consistently matched them to Himalayan brown bears, Tibetan brown bears, and other known local animals. Not a single relic has ever pointed to an unknown species. It seems these artifacts were likely ceremonial or artistic, not the remains of a genuine cryptid. So, if it's not an unknown primate, what is it? The most scientifically accepted theory points to the Himalayan brown bear, a critically endangered subspecies living in the region. These bears can and do walk on their hind legs, especially when startled or curious. Imagine seeing that from a distance, in a snowstorm, through the disorienting glare of the high-altitude sun. An upright bear could easily be mistaken for a humanoid figure. Their reddish-brown fur matches many Yeti descriptions, and their footprints, when melted, can look eerily large and human-like. Remember that 2014 DNA study? It linked several Yeti samples directly to these bears. The Tibetan blue bear, another rare subspecies, might also play a role in the legend. The bear hypothesis explains the sightings without needing a new species, though some witnesses still swear what they saw was no bear. Another popular theory, much like the one for Bigfoot, is that the Yeti is a surviving population of Gigantopithecus. This massive prehistoric ape lived in Asia until about 100,000 years ago, so the timing and location are a bit more plausible than for its North American cousin. But this theory has major problems. First, Gigantopithecus was likely a quadruped, walking on all fours, not an upright biped like the Yeti. Second, it lived in lowland forests, a far cry from the freezing, oxygen-poor environment of the high Himalayas. No Gigantopithecus fossils have ever been found in the mountains. They're all from Southeast Asia. For a giant ape to adapt to such extreme conditions would require massive evolutionary changes, essentially creating an entirely new species. The Gigantopithecus hypothesis just raises more questions than it answers. And those conditions are truly extreme. Life in the Himalayas poses severe challenges for any large mammal. Above 15,000 feet, oxygen levels plummet. Temperatures are brutal. Food is incredibly scarce. A large animal needs a massive number of calories to survive, but the high-altitude zones offer very little. What would a Yeti eat? How could it find enough energy to stay alive, let alone support a breeding population? While animals like the snow leopard do thrive there, they have specific adaptations honed over millennia. The idea of a large primate surviving in this environment without any evidence of the necessary biological tools seems incredibly unlikely from a scientific standpoint. The legendary mountaineer Reinhold Messner, the first person to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks, actually investigated the Yeti legend himself. In 1986, Messner had his own encounter with what he first thought was a Yeti, a large, upright creature. He later concluded it was a Himalayan brown bear. He spent years researching the stories, interviewing Sherpa communities, and examining the evidence. In his book, My Quest for the Yeti, he concluded that the legends are a mix of bear encounters, cultural traditions, and simple misidentification. Coming from someone with Messner's unparalleled experience in the Himalayas, his conclusion carries a lot of weight. Of course, some believers dismiss his findings, but his investigation represents one of the most serious attempts by a qualified expert to solve the mystery. We also have to consider the human mind. High-altitude mountaineering dramatically affects our perception. Altitude sickness can cause confusion, impaired judgment, and even hallucinations. In the death zone above 26,000 feet, climbers have reported seeing phantom companions and other visual distortions. Could some Yeti sightings be the product of an oxygen-starved brain? A climber who is exhausted, cold, and under extreme physical stress might easily misinterpret a rock, a shadow, or a passing animal as a humanoid figure. This doesn't explain every report, especially those from lower altitudes or from acclimatized Sherpas, but it's a very real factor that must be considered when evaluating these extraordinary claims. Over the years, numerous expeditions have set out specifically to find the Yeti, and they've all come back empty-handed. Hillary's 1960 expedition was a massive effort, and they found nothing but debunked relics. Modern expeditions armed with trail cameras, DNA kits, and systematic survey methods have documented the region's wildlife extensively. They found plenty of bears and snow leopards, but no signs of an unknown primate. Believers argue that the Himalayas are vast, and the Yeti is intelligent and elusive. They say the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but the consistent failure of so many targeted searches makes it increasingly likely that there's simply nothing there to find. Finally, it's crucial to discuss the ethical side of the Yeti hunt. Many in the indigenous Himalayan communities are frustrated with how Westerners treat their culture. Sacred traditions and spiritual beliefs get boiled down to a monster hunt. Outsiders show up looking for a sensational discovery, often ignoring the deep cultural context and local knowledge. This dynamic is part of a larger, uncomfortable history of Western exploitation. While some communities welcome the tourism that Yeti fever brings, others resent having their traditions sensationalized. An ethical approach would mean centering indigenous voices, respecting cultural nuances, and understanding that the Yeti's true meaning might be more spiritual than zoological. The mystery can't be separated from the history between Western science and indigenous knowledge. So what's the verdict on the Yeti? The scientific consensus is clear. The legend is most likely a combination of factors: misidentified Himalayan brown bears, ancient cultural traditions, and the perceptual tricks played by extreme altitude all contribute to the myth. There is zero physical evidence to support the existence of an unknown primate in the Himalayas. Every piece of testable evidence, from scalps to hair, has been identified as a known animal. The harsh environment makes a breeding population of such a creature biologically implausible. The abominable snowman, it seems, is a powerful myth, but not a real mammal. From the freezing peaks of the Himalayas, our journey now takes us to warmer climates, where a very different kind of cryptid is said to roam. In Latin America, a creature called the Chupacabra allegedly drains the blood from livestock, leaving a trail of mysterious deaths. Unlike the ape-like Bigfoot and Yeti, the Chupacabra is described as reptilian, alien, or even canine. This modern monster only emerged in the 1990s, but its legend spread like wildfire. The name itself sends a shiver down the spine. In Spanish, it means goat sucker, a chilling description of the creature's alleged habit: draining the blood of livestock, especially goats, leaving behind carcasses marked only by mysterious puncture wounds. Unlike ancient beasts of lore with centuries of tradition, the Chupacabra burst onto the scene in 1995 in Puerto Rico. From there, reports spread like wildfire across Latin America and into the American Southwest. But the descriptions vary wildly, suggesting either multiple strange phenomena or a mythology that's constantly evolving. So what's really behind the Chupacabra reports? A genuine unknown predator, or a modern folktale born from fear and misunderstanding? It all began in March of 1995 in the town of Canovanas, Puerto Rico. Residents woke to a gruesome sight: 8 sheep, dead, with strange puncture wounds and seemingly drained of all their blood. More incidents followed, and soon reports of a bizarre creature began to surface. Witnesses described a bipedal being about 4 feet tall, with grayish skin, huge eyes, and a line of sharp spikes running down its back. Some even mentioned wings. It supposedly hopped around like a kangaroo. Local news coverage fanned the flames of fear, and within months, hundreds of Chupacabra sightings were reported across the island. The phenomenon then leaped to Mexico, Central and South America, and eventually the southern United States. This incredibly rapid spread is unusual in the world of cryptozoology. It makes you wonder, was this a new predator appearing out of nowhere, or a modern myth spreading through the media instead of ancient oral tradition? Interestingly, many of the early Chupacabra descriptions sounded a lot like our classic image of an alien. Gray skin, big black eyes, a small body with an oversized head. This striking resemblance led many to connect the Chupacabra to UFOs. Puerto Rico was a hotspot for UFO reports in the 90s, and some theorists believed the two phenomena were linked. The ideas were wild, ranging from escaped extraterrestrial pets to secret government experiments creating alien-human hybrids. It's also worth noting this was happening right when The X-Files was at the peak of its popularity, and alien conspiracies were a huge part of pop culture. Some researchers suggest this wasn't a coincidence. Perhaps witnesses' descriptions were unintentionally influenced by the sci-fi they were watching. The alien connection is speculative for sure, but it shows how our modern culture can shape the monsters we see in the shadows. Chupacabra. But then, as we entered the 2000s, the Chupacabra seemed to change. Especially in Mexico and the American Southwest, the descriptions shifted dramatically. Gone was the bipedal alien-like creature. In its place were reports of a hairless, four-legged dog-like animal with a long snout and a bony, pronounced spine. It looked starved and terrifying. Several of these canine chupacabras were actually captured or killed, and when scientists ran DNA tests, the results were consistent. They were coyotes, dogs, or coyote-dog hybrids, suffering from a severe case of sarcoptic mange. Mange is a nasty skin disease caused by mites that leads to hair loss, wrinkled skin, and extreme weight loss. transforming a normal animal into a truly horrifying sight. These sick animals are often desperate for easy food, which would explain why they might attack livestock. This mange theory convincingly explains most of the recent Chupacabra sightings, but it doesn't quite line up with those original spiky descriptions from Puerto Rico. Now let's talk about the most famous and freaky part of the legend, the blood draining. Witnesses claimed that livestock were found completely drained of blood through just a couple of small puncture wounds. This vampire-like detail seems impossible for any known predator. However, veterinary pathologists who've examined these supposed victims have found much more ordinary explanations. When an animal dies, gravity causes its blood to pool at the lowest point of the body. This can create the false impression that the blood is gone. As for the puncture wounds, they can be caused by predators, scavengers, or even insects after death. In warm climates, decomposition happens fast and can make a carcass look very strange. The truth is, livestock die from all sorts of things: disease, accidents, attacks from regular predators like stray dogs. But when it happens in an area gripped by Chupacabra fear, the blame gets placed on the monster. The incredible speed at which the Chupacabra legend spread points to a powerful influence: pop culture. Think about this. The original descriptions from Puerto Rico in 1995 sound remarkably similar to Sil, the alien-human hybrid from the sci-fi horror film Species, which had just been released. The creature in the movie had grey skin, spikes on its back, and similar body proportions. Some researchers believe witnesses might have unconsciously borrowed details from the film they'd just seen. As the story was picked up by TV shows, tabloid papers, and the early internet, the descriptions became a chaotic mix of different ideas. This created a feedback loop. Media reports shaped what people thought they saw, and those new sightings generated even more media coverage. The Chupacabra might be a perfect real-time example of how a modern myth is born in the age of mass media. While the name Chupacabra was new in 1995, the idea of a vampiric creature was not new to Latin American folklore. Back in the 1970s, Puerto Rico had reports of the Mocha vampire, which was also said to kill animals by draining their blood. Mexican folklore is full of tales of shape-shifting naguals and other blood-drinking entities, so some researchers argue that the Chupacabra isn't an entirely new legend, but a modern version of an ancient archetypal fear. The 1990s were a time of economic stress and social change in Puerto Rico. The Chupacabra could be seen as a cultural expression of real-world anxieties about losing livestock, financial insecurity, and facing mysterious threats, all wrapped up in a monster that mixed traditional vampire stories with the new fear of aliens. Let's not forget the real-world impact here. For farmers and rural communities, losing livestock is a serious economic blow. When predators kill your goats or chickens, you want an explanation. Blaming the Chupacabra, instead of more mundane causes like stray dogs or disease, can actually be psychologically comforting. It creates a clear, mysterious enemy for the community to rally against. In some cases, farmers might even claim a Chupacabra attack to try and get compensation from government programs that pay for livestock killed by predators. And of course, there's Chupacabra tourism. The media attention, tours, and merchandise that can bring money into a community. These economic factors don't explain the whole story, but they help us understand why the legend has such staying power, even if it seems biologically impossible. When biologists and other scientists have investigated the Chupacabra, they consistently find ordinary explanations. Necropsies on alleged victims show normal causes of death. Every captured Chupacabra has turned out to be a coyote or dog with mange. Scientists have even sampled DNA from the environment in sighting areas and found no trace of an unknown species. The scientific consensus is overwhelming. There is no evidence to support the existence of a new, blood-sucking creature. The Chupacabra phenomenon is a fascinating mix of misidentified mangy animals, normal livestock deaths being blamed on a mystery monster, and a modern folktale being amplified by the media. Of course, where there's a mystery, there's a conspiracy theory. Some people claim the Chupacabra is actually an escaped genetic experiment from a secret government lab. Others suggest the government intentionally released the creature as some kind of bioweapon. These theories often point to Vieques, an island in Puerto Rico where the US Navy conducted controversial weapons tests for decades. Pro-opponents say the lack of official proof is just part of a massive cover-up, but these theories rely on speculation, not evidence. Psychologically, they offer a simple, if sinister, explanation for confusing events. It can be more comforting to believe in a villainous government than to accept that bad things sometimes just happen randomly. These conspiracy theories often reflect a deeper distrust of authority and official explanations. So, beyond the question of whether it's a real animal, the Chupacabra has a powerful cultural significance. It has become a true icon in Latin American pop culture, showing up in movies, music, and art. It represents a unique piece of cultural identity, a monster born in Latin America, not imported from somewhere else. For people in the diaspora, the Chupacabra is a connection back to their homeland and its folklore. The creature's ever-changing form allows it to be many things at once: a source of horror, a punchline to a joke, a metaphor for social anxieties, or a symbol of cultural pride. The Chupacabra's cultural reality is undeniable, even if its biological reality is not. It exists as an idea, a symbol, and a story that connects people. In the end, all the scientific evidence points to one conclusion: the Chupacabra is a modern myth, not a biological creature. The original reports from Puerto Rico were likely a mix of misidentification, the influence of pop culture, and real attacks by known animals. The canine chupacabras seen since are convincingly explained as coyotes and dogs with severe mange. And the blood draining, that comes from a misunderstanding of what happens to a body after death. Biologically, the verdict is clear: the Chupacabra doesn't exist. Culturally, however, it is very, very real. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into modern mythology, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries. From the modern legends of Latin America, we now journey to the deep, ancient jungles of Central Africa. Here, a different kind of mystery persists. It's called Mokele-Mbembe, a creature said to be a living dinosaur hiding in the vast swamps of the Congo. Unlike the Chupacabra, this legend has deep roots in local folklore and has inspired expeditions for over a century. Could a dinosaur truly have survived in one of the most remote places on Earth? Deep in the Congo basin, within impenetrable swamps and remote river systems, local communities speak of Mokele-Mbembe. Deep in the Congo basin, within impenetrable swamps and remote river systems, local communities speak of Mokele-Mbembe. They describe a creature larger than an elephant with a long neck, a small head, and a powerful tail. The descriptions match sauropod dinosaurs remarkably well. For over a century, Western explorers and cryptozoologists have mounted expeditions to find this alleged living dinosaur. The Congo's vast unexplored wilderness seems like the perfect refuge for prehistoric survivors. But does Mokele-Mbembe exist? Or is this another case of misidentification and wishful thinking? Mokele-Mbembe, from the Lingala language, approximately translates to one who stops the flow of rivers, describing a creature of immense size. Pygmy communities and Bantu peoples of the Congo basin have traditions describing a large aquatic animal inhabiting deep pools and rivers. Different ethnic groups have different names: Chipekwe, Dingonek, Emelantuka. Some descriptions emphasize the creature's hippopotamus-like behavior, others its reptilian characteristics. European explorers first documented these accounts in the early 20th century. Importantly, when shown pictures of various animals, some indigenous witnesses reportedly identified sauropod dinosaurs as resembling Mokele-Mbembe. However, interpreting these identifications is complex. Were witnesses genuinely recognizing a familiar creature or responding to leading questions from eager cryptozoologists? The cultural context of these testimonies requires careful, respectful analysis. German explorer Karl Hagenbeck first brought Mokele-Mbembe to Western attention in 1909, reporting indigenous accounts of a half-elephant, half-dragon creature. In 1913, German Captain Ludwig Freiherr von Stein zu Lausnitz reported extensive testimony from Congo natives describing a similar creature. Between the 1930s and 1980s, sporadic expeditions searched for evidence. Roy McCall, a biologist from the University of Chicago, led expeditions in 1980 and 1981, collecting testimony but no physical evidence. Herman Registers claimed to have photographed Mokele-Mbembe in 1981, but the photographs showed only unclear images. These early expeditions established Mokele-Mbembe in cryptozoological literature, but produced nothing scientifically verifiable. The pattern mirrored other cryptid searches: enthusiastic expeditions, indigenous testimony, alleged sightings but zero physical evidence. If Mokele-Mbembe exists, cryptozoologists propose it's a surviving sauropod dinosaur, possibly resembling Brachiosaurus or Apatosaurus. Sauropods were massive herbivores with long necks, small heads, barrel-shaped bodies, and columnar legs. They dominated Mesozoic landscapes, but went extinct 66 million years ago in the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. The dinosaur hypothesis faces severe problems. First, sauropods were terrestrial animals, not aquatic, contradicting Mokele-Mbembe's allegedly amphibious habits. Second, dinosaurs haven't existed for 66 million years. Maintaining a breeding population for that long without leaving any fossils seems impossible. Third, sauropods required enormous amounts of vegetation. Congo swamps couldn't sustain their dietary needs. Fourth, sauropods had specific anatomical requirements. Their massive size needed strong bones and cardiovascular systems that preclude the flexibility described for Mokele-Mbembe. The dinosaur hypothesis is romantically appealing, but biologically implausible. Skeptics propose that Mokele-Mbembe sightings are misidentified hippopotamuses. Hippos inhabit Congo waterways, are extremely large and dangerous, and display behaviors matching some Mokele-Mbembe descriptions. When hippos submerge with only their backs visible, they might resemble the humps attributed to lake monsters or aquatic dinosaurs. Hippos are territorial and aggressive, explaining reports of Mokele-Mbembe attacking canoes. Indigenous communities know hippos well, having coexisted for millennia. But cryptozoologists counter that locals distinguish between known hippos and the mysterious Mokele-Mbembe. However, cultural transmission of folklore might maintain Mokele-Mbembe as a separate entity, despite originating from unusual hippo encounters. Unfamiliar hippo behaviors, like those of young or injured individuals, or hippos in unexpected locations, might be interpreted through the Mokele-Mbembe framework. The hippo hypothesis explains many reports, but not all details, particularly the long neck descriptions. Another prosaic explanation involves African forest elephants, or more intriguingly, undiscovered rhinoceros species. Historical reports mention creatures with single horns, which led some to consider rhinos. Central Africa once hosted diverse megafauna, and species extinctions occurred relatively recently. The Emelan-Tuka, a related cryptid, is described as rhinoceros-like with a single horn. Could surviving populations of rare megafauna, possibly unknown species or subspecies of known animals, explain Mokele-Mbembe? Forest elephants, when partially obscured by vegetation and water, might appear to have unusual proportions. A submerged elephant with its trunk extended could resemble a long-necked creature. While less sensational than dinosaurs, discovering unknown populations of large mammals would still be scientifically significant. However, systematic wildlife surveys in the Congo haven't revealed unknown large mammals, making even this more modest explanation unlikely. Large Nile crocodiles inhabit Congo waterways, occasionally reaching lengths over 16 feet. From a distance, particularly when only partially visible, large crocodiles might be misidentified. A crocodile's tail breaking the surface could resemble a long neck. Multiple crocodiles swimming in formation might create the impression of a single large creature with humps. Crocodiles occasionally stand on their hind legs to reach vegetation or traverse obstacles, potentially creating bipedal impressions. They're dangerous, attacking boats and humans, which matches Mokele-Mbembe's aggressive reputation. Indigenous peoples obviously know crocodiles, but in poor visibility, at a distance or under stressful circumstances, familiar animals might be misperceived. Additionally, exceptionally large crocodile individuals, what locals might call grandfather crocodiles, could be legendary enough to inspire distinct cryptid traditions. The crocodile hypothesis provides a prosaic but plausible explanation for some Mokele-Mbembe encounters. The Congo basin presents extreme exploration challenges. Dense jungle, vast swamps, political instability, diseases including malaria and Ebola, and limited infrastructure make systematic surveys difficult. Much of the region remains poorly documented scientifically. These conditions create two opposing implications for cryptozoology. First, this unexplored wilderness could harbor unknown species, making Mokele-Mbembe plausible. Second, these same challenges make cryptozoological expeditions inadequate for definitive searches. Brief expeditions by non-experts, relying on guides and interpreters, with limited equipment and training, cannot conclusively prove or disprove a cryptid's existence. Professional wildlife surveys, though increasing, focus on known species conservation rather than cryptid searches. The vastness and inaccessibility of the Congo wilderness means absence of evidence doesn't equal evidence of absence, but it also means cryptozoologists can perpetually claim their quarry hides in unexplored areas. Despite over a century of reports and numerous expeditions, no physical evidence of Mokele-Mbembe exists. No bones, no teeth, no tissue samples, no DNA, no clear photographs. If Mokele-Mbembe were real, a breeding population would require dozens to hundreds of individuals. These animals would die, leaving remains. They would leave tracks, disturb vegetation, and produce waste. Yet, nothing has been found. Camera traps deployed for wildlife conservation studies photographed elephants, gorillas, leopards, and countless other species, but never Mokele-Mbembe. Environmental DNA sampling, which can detect a species' presence from water or soil samples, finds known species but no unknown large vertebrates. The complete absence of physical evidence after extensive modern surveillance increasingly argues against its existence. Science cannot prove absolute non-existence, but the null hypothesis that Mokele-Mbembe doesn't exist becomes stronger yearly as technology improves and evidence remains absent. The Mokele-Mbembe phenomenon cannot be separated from colonialism. European and American cryptozoologists traveling to Africa, relying on indigenous guides and informants, seeking to validate Western scientific categories by discovering dinosaurs. This dynamic echoes colonial exploitation patterns. Indigenous knowledge is simultaneously valued and dismissed, valued when supporting cryptozoological claims, dismissed when suggesting the creature is spiritual or metaphorical rather than literal. Economic disparities mean Western cryptozoologists control narratives, publish findings, and profit from expeditions, while local communities receive minimal benefits. Some expeditions have behaved unethically, disrupting communities, making promises they don't keep, or appropriating cultural traditions. The search for Mokele-Mbembe often reveals more about Western obsessions than African reality. Some Mokele-Mbembe expeditions have been funded by young Earth creationists who believe finding living dinosaurs would disprove evolution and support biblical literalism. If dinosaurs and humans coexist, the argument goes, then evolutionary timelines are wrong. This ideological motivation compromises scientific objectivity. Expeditions with predetermined conclusions interpret evidence through confirmation bias, seeing what they want to see. Young Earth creationist involvement has damaged Mokele-Mbembe cryptozoology's credibility in mainstream science. However, it also reveals how cryptids become proxies in larger cultural battles between science and religion, evolution and creationism, secular and religious worldviews. Mokele-Mbembe is weaponized in ideological conflicts, far removed from zoological questions, making objective investigation even more difficult. So, what's the verdict? Scientific consensus concludes Mokele-Mbembe almost certainly doesn't exist as a living dinosaur. Dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago. Surviving populations are biologically implausible. The complete absence of physical evidence argues decisively against its existence. Indigenous testimonies likely reflect cultural traditions, misidentifications of known animals like hippos or crocodiles, or responses to leading questions from eager cryptozoologists. Mokele-Mbembe persists as a legend, a cultural tradition, and a symbol of African mystery rather than a biological reality. The search reveals more about Western fantasies of Africa than African wildlife. From African rivers, we return to North America, where indigenous peoples told of massive birds with wingspans so great they created thunder with their flight. The Thunderbird, a creature from Native American mythology, occasionally appears in modern cryptozoology as reports surface of enormous flying creatures that shouldn't exist. Are Thunderbirds spiritual entities, misidentified known birds, or something genuinely mysterious? The Thunderbird, a name that echoes across the vast landscapes of North America, from the icy reaches of Alaska through the Great Plains and to the Pacific Northwest. This legendary bird soars through art, stories, and spiritual traditions. It's described as a creature of immense size, with a wingspan stretching 20 feet or more. A being so powerful, it creates thunder with the beat of its wings and shoots lightning from its eyes. While it's clearly a mythological figure in traditional contexts, some modern cryptozoologists look at the occasional reports of impossibly large birds and wonder. Could the Thunderbird be a real undiscovered species? So what is it? A sacred symbol, a faded memory of an extinct species, or a hidden giant still sailing through our most remote skies? Across many Native American cultures, the Thunderbird holds deep, sacred significance, though its specific meaning can vary from tribe to tribe. For Pacific Northwest traditions, it's a powerful supernatural being tied to storms and transformation. Among Plains tribes, the Thunderbird is a protector, a warrior. The Anishinaabe people tell stories of the Thunderbird battling underwater serpents. It's crucial to understand that these are spiritual and cultural entities, not zoological specimens. Many indigenous people emphasize that the Thunderbird exists in a spiritual reality, not a physical one, serving vital symbolic and moral roles in their worldview. The Western cryptozoological habit of interpreting the Thunderbird as a literal biological cryptid often misses this spiritual depth and can be seen as cultural appropriation. While some indigenous communities welcome interest, others find this approach disrespectful. To truly understand the Thunderbird, we must respect its primary cultural and spiritual significance, not just reduce it to a monster-hunting curiosity. But what about historical accounts? Early European colonists wrote about seeing eagles of incredible size. Then there's the famous story from 1890, where newspapers reported that a giant bird with a wingspan over 30 feet was killed in Arizona. Attached to this story is the legend of the Thunderbird photograph, supposedly showing 6 men holding up the massive crucified creature. The problem? Despite many people claiming they remember seeing it, no verified copy has ever been found. It's a classic example of potential false memory. Still, throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, accounts of gigantic birds attacking livestock or terrifying witnesses were surprisingly common. Skeptics rightly point out that this was an era of sensational journalism and limited scientific literacy. Misidentifications, exaggerations, and outright hoaxes were everywhere. And yet, the sheer consistency of these giant bird reports across different times and places continues to intrigue cryptozoologists. They argue that where there's this much smoke, there must be some fire. Even today, sightings of giant birds continue to pop up sporadically. Back in 2002, several people in Alaska reported seeing a bird with a wingspan estimated between 14 and 18 feet. Illinois had a whole wave of sightings back in the 1970s, with some witnesses describing birds larger than small airplanes. Pennsylvania, Texas, and other states have their own occasional reports. The descriptions are often similar: massive, dark-colored birds, sometimes with reptilian or prehistoric features. But when photos and videos emerge, they almost always turn out to be known large birds, like eagles or condors. Their size gets wildly exaggerated by perspective, distance, and a lack of reference points. Let's be honest, estimating the size of something flying in the open sky is notoriously difficult. Our brains just aren't good at it. A bird can look enormous against a blank sky, but perfectly normal when it flies past a tree. Most modern sightings are likely just cases of mistaken identity, where our perception gets tricked. So, Could the Thunderbird legends be a kind of cultural memory, preserving tales of real extinct giant birds called teratorns? The species Teratornis merriami lived in North America until about 10,000 years ago, and it had a wingspan of 12 to 14 feet. Even bigger was Argentavis magnificens from South America, which boasted a wingspan of up to 23 feet, one of the largest flying birds ever known. These massive predators lived alongside the first humans in the Americas. It's a romantic idea that oral traditions might hold memories of these encounters, but there's a problem. Teratorns went extinct thousands of years before most current Native American cultural traditions formed. The idea that oral history could preserve accurate details for 10 millennia is a bit of a stretch. And more importantly, if a population of teratorns had survived to the present day, we'd find physical evidence: bones, feathers, massive nests. The teratorn hypothesis is exciting, but it suffers from the same lack of evidence as any other cryptid theory. Let's look at the birds we know exist today. The largest flying birds in North America are the California condor, with a wingspan that can reach nearly 10 feet, and the bald eagle, which can top 7 feet. These are magnificent, huge birds, but they're a far cry from the 20-foot wingspans of legend. However, psychology plays a huge role here. Perspective and expectation can dramatically alter how we perceive size. If you see a condor unexpectedly up close, or an eagle against a vast empty sky, your brain might tell you it's much, much larger than it really is. An individual bird at the absolute upper limit of its species' size range could easily be mistaken for something unknown. The most logical explanation for most Thunderbird sightings is simply the misidentification of a known large bird, with its size blown way out of proportion by psychological and perceptual tricks. It's not as exciting, I know, but it fits the evidence much better than an undiscovered giant. Of course, there's always a more extreme theory. Some cryptozoologists suggest that Thunderbirds are actually surviving pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that vanished with the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Creatures like Quetzalcoatlus had wingspans over 30 feet. This theory is, well, it's extremely unlikely. Pterosaurs weren't birds, they were reptiles with a totally different anatomy. They had leathery wings, no feathers, and different skeletons. The idea that a breeding population could survive for 66 million years without leaving a single fossil is frankly impossible. They required specific ecosystems that just don't exist anymore. The pterosaur hypothesis is a classic case of wishful thinking. The desire to find living prehistoric animals is powerful, but desire doesn't create reality. There is zero scientific evidence to support pterosaur survival, and every principle of biology argues against it. What about more modern explanations? Some recent Thunderbird sightings might actually be misidentified aircraft. Small planes, hang gliders, ultralights, and especially large drones can easily be mistaken for birds from a distance or in poor lighting. Our brain has to make a quick choice. Is that thing in the sky a bird or a machine? If it makes the wrong call, a witness might report a giant bird simply because their brain is trying to make sense of what it is seeing. Drones are a particularly good candidate for confusion. They can be silent, come in all shapes and sizes, and some are even designed with flapping wings to mimic biological flight. As drone technology becomes more common, reports of strange aerial phenomena are also on the rise. This doesn't explain the historical reports, of course, but it shows how our modern world can create its own monsters. Psychology plays a massive role in all of this. Fear is a powerful amplifier. An encounter with any large bird of prey can be genuinely frightening, and that fear can lead to exaggerated estimates of its size. Expectation also shapes what we see. If you go to an area famous for Thunderbird legends, you're more likely to interpret an ambiguous shape in the sky as a Thunderbird. And our memories aren't perfect recordings. They're reconstructed every time we recall them. Details can be added or changed over time, especially when social validation comes into play. If other people confirm your sighting, your belief in it gets stronger, regardless of the objective facts. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying. Their experiences are real and sincere, but those experiences may not perfectly match external reality. Understanding these psychological factors is key to evaluating any cryptid testimony. And then there's the photographic evidence, or rather, the lack of it. Every alleged photo of a thunderbird is either blurry, taken from a huge distance, has nothing in it for scale, or is very obviously a picture of a known bird. We live in an age where almost everyone carries a high-definition camera in their pocket. The fact that there are still no clear, verifiable photos of a thunderbird is extremely telling. Yes, birds are hard to photograph, but professional wildlife photographers manage to get stunning shots of eagles and condors all the time. If thunderbirds were real and sighted as often as people claim, we would have clear photographic evidence by now. The complete absence of this evidence argues strongly against their existence. The photographic record for the thunderbird is effectively zero. From a scientific standpoint, professional ornithologists universally reject the idea of the thunderbird. There is simply no evidence, no specimens, no feathers, no nests, no DNA, to support the existence of an unknown giant bird species in North America. We study bird migration patterns extensively, a creature that large couldn't hide from radar, satellite tracking, and the thousands of dedicated bird watchers out there every day. A breeding population of giant raptors would need a huge territory, a stable food source, and massive nesting sites, all of which would have been discovered. Furthermore, biology and physics place firm limits on how large a flying bird can be. Argentavis was already pushing the absolute maximum. Anything larger would require a completely different body plan or a different atmosphere to fly in. The ornithological consensus is clear. Thunderbirds, as described by cryptozoology, simply do not exist. So in the end, the thunderbird exists powerfully in the cultural, spiritual, and symbolic realms. Its significance to indigenous communities is profound and real, even if it isn't biological. The insistence on a literal physical interpretation misses this incredible richness. A symbol can be true and meaningful without being materially real. The thunderbird teaches lessons, connects communities to their sacred traditions, and represents powerful spiritual principles. Reducing it to just another cryptid to be hunted disrespects its true purpose. Perhaps the question shouldn't be whether thunderbirds physically exist, but what the thunderbird means and why this symbol resonates so powerfully across cultures and centuries. From the skies, we now descend to the seas, where monsters have been reported for millennia. Sea serpents, giant creatures of the deep, appear in accounts from ancient sailors to modern fishermen. The ocean's vastness and mystery make aquatic cryptids seem particularly plausible. After all, the ocean remains largely unexplored and we are discovering new marine species all the time. Could sea serpents, creatures like Cadborosaurus or Morgor, actually inhabit our oceans? Let's dive into the depths and investigate. Sea serpents. For centuries, sailors have whispered tales of long, sinuous creatures with horse-like heads and bodies that ripple through the waves, some stretching over 100 feet. From the Pacific Northwest's Caddy to Cornwall's Morgor, these legends span the globe. Our oceans cover over 70% of the Earth and plunge to depths of 36,000 feet. It seems like the perfect hiding place for unknown creatures. But are sea serpents real, or just tall tales born from misidentified animals and strange ocean phenomena? Sea serpent reports go back hundreds of years. Old medieval maps were famously decorated with sea monsters and the ominous warning, "Here be dragons." In 1741, a Norwegian missionary named Hans Egede described a terrifying sea monster off the coast of Greenland, complete with a long neck and huge fins. Then in 1848, the crew of the HMS Daedalus reported a 60-foot serpent swimming with its head above the water in the South Atlantic. This detailed account from experienced naval officers ignited a fierce debate that echoed through newspapers and ship logs of the 19th century. Of course, skeptics point out that back then, our understanding of marine life was limited, and sailors could be a superstitious bunch. As marine biology advanced, sightings seemed to drop off. But believers have a different take. Perhaps it as just that shipping routes and the ships themselves have changed, not that the creatures have vanished. Let's talk about Cadborosaurus wilsei, or Caddy, a famous sea serpent said to haunt the Pacific Northwest coast. Descriptions paint a picture of a creature with a horse-like head, a long serpentine body and flippers. These stories go way back, from indigenous traditions to modern-day sightings. The most famous pieces of evidence are a controversial 1937 photograph and a strange carcass found in a whale's stomach that same year. While it looked like a long-necked creature, later analysis suggested it was likely just a decomposed basking shark or even a fetal whale. Most caddy sightings are of long, snake-like shapes on the surface, which skeptics say could be anything from a line of sea lions or porpoises to giant oarfish floating kelp or even driftwood. It just goes to show how many ordinary things can trick our eyes into seeing a monster. So, what is the most likely culprit behind sea serpent legends? Meet the oarfish. These are real and they look absolutely otherworldly. They're incredibly long, sometimes reaching over 30 feet, with silvery bodies and a crown of bright red fins. They swim in a distinct, undulating motion that perfectly matches classic sea serpent descriptions. Oarfish are deep water dwellers, so they rarely come to the surface. When they do, usually because they're sick or injured, they make quite an impression. Sometimes they wash ashore, and as they decompose, their bodies can look even stranger, fueling local monster myths. Many historical sea serpent carcasses, when finally examined by scientists, have turned out to be nothing more than an oarfish. But they don't explain everything, especially reports of creatures much larger. Another major player in the sea serpent mystery is the basking shark. These gentle giants are the second largest fish in the sea. When they die, something fascinating happens. As they decompose, their lower jaw and gills often fall away first, leaving behind the skull and spine. The result is a carcass that looks eerily like a long-necked, small-headed plesiosaur, or sea serpent. A famous example is the Zuiyo Maru carcass, dragged up by a Japanese fishing boat in 1977. It caused a huge sensation, with many believing it was a prehistoric monster. But tissue analysis later confirmed it was just a decomposing, basking shark. This pattern happens over and over. A mysterious carcass washes up, gets everyone excited, and then science reveals the truth. It's a classic case of mistaken identity. Even familiar giants like whales can be mistaken for monsters. During mating, a whale's penis can extend several feet and has been misidentified as a serpentine creature more than once. When a whale carcass bloats and decomposes, it can take on bizarre, unrecognizable shapes. And have you ever seen a pod of whales swimming in a single file line? From a distance, their humps breaking the surface look just like the classic image of a sea serpent. Even their spouts can create optical illusions. None of this makes whales any less magnificent. It just shows how our brains can misinterpret something familiar when we see it in an unfamiliar way. The ocean is full of surprises, and it's easy to let our imaginations run wild. But here's the thing. Sometimes sea monsters are real. Take the giant squid. For centuries, it was the stuff of legend, the terrifying kraken that could pull ships to the bottom of the sea. Scientists dismissed these as sailors' fantasies until carcasses started washing ashore in the late 19th century. Even then, it wasn't until 2004 that we got the first footage of a live one in its deep-sea home. These animals are incredible, growing over 40 feet long with eyes the size of dinner plates. The story of the giant squid proves that huge, unknown animals can exist, hidden from us for centuries. But it also shows that once science starts looking seriously, the evidence eventually appears. The giant squid went from myth to a real, albeit rare, animal. And the mysteries don't stop there. The colossal squid is even bigger and more elusive than the giant squid, potentially reaching over 45 feet and weighing nearly 1,500 pounds. It lives in the freezing depths of the Antarctic, and we've only ever seen a few specimens. The deep ocean is still Earth's last great frontier. We've mapped less than 5% of it in high resolution. New species are discovered all the time. This makes marine cryptids seem more plausible than land-based ones. However, our technology is getting better. We have underwater cameras, submarines, and ROVs constantly surveying the depths. They photograph countless known species, but so far no sea serpents. The better our technology gets without finding them, the less likely their existence seems. Of course, not every sighting needs a biological explanation. Sometimes it's just stuff. Large mats of kelp or sargassum weed can tear loose in a storm and float on the surface, looking like a long, moving creature from a distance. A waterlogged piece of driftwood bobbing in the waves can easily be mistaken for a serpent's head and humps, especially if several logs are tangled together. Waves and currents make these objects move, creating the illusion of life. Add some birds splashing around them, and you've got yourself a monster. In the right light from far away, the ocean is a master of disguise, turning the mundane into the monstrous. Skeptics believe most sea serpent sightings are nothing more than this. Even our modern technology can get confused. Every now and then, sonar will pick up a large, unidentified underwater object, sparking speculation. These unidentified sonar contacts, along with strange underwater sounds, sometimes don't have an immediate explanation. Cryptozoologists might jump on this as proof, but marine biologists are quick to point out that unidentified doesn't mean unknown species. Usually, with a little investigation, these anomalies turn out to be whale pods, large schools of fish, or even geological events. The famous bloop sound recorded in 1997 was once thought to be a massive, unknown creature. It was later identified as the sound of a giant iceberg cracking and breaking away in Antarctica. The pattern is almost always the same. Mystery gives way to a mundane explanation. So, what's the final verdict? The scientific consensus is that the classic sea serpent, a giant prehistoric-looking reptile of the sea, almost certainly doesn't exist. There are just too many plausible explanations, from oarfish and basking sharks to whales and even floating logs, that account for the sightings. While the ocean is vast and mysterious, our extensive research into marine megafauna has turned up zero physical evidence for sea serpents. No bodies, no DNA, no bones. But does that mean the ocean has no secrets left? Absolutely not. There are undoubtedly undiscovered species out there, maybe even some impressively large ones, but they're more likely to be new types of fish or squid, not the mythical dragons from old sailors' tales. From the ocean's mysterious depths, our journey now takes us to the forests and towns of West Virginia. Here in the 1960s, a truly bizarre series of events unfolded around a creature known as the Mothman. This winged, red-eyed being terrified the residents of Point Pleasant. But this story is different. It's tangled up with a real-life tragedy, the catastrophic collapse of the Silver Bridge. On November 15, 1966, two young couples were driving near an abandoned World War II munitions plant just outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when they encountered something impossible. It was a creature, over 7 feet tall, with massive wings and glowing red eyes. It chased their car, flying at speeds over 100 miles per hour. This was the first widely publicized Mothman sighting, but it wouldn't be the last. For 13 months, Point Pleasant experienced a wave of cryptid encounters, UFO sightings, and strange phenomena, all culminating in a terrible tragedy when the Silver Bridge collapsed in December 1967. So, what was Mothman? The story exploded with that first encounter involving Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet. They claimed to see a large grey man-shaped creature with wings and those piercing red eyes near the abandoned North Power Plant. They floored it, but the creature apparently kept pace with their car as it sped over 100 miles per hour. When they reported it, the local police investigated but found nothing. But then, within days, more residents started reporting similar encounters. A winged creature with hypnotic red eyes, seen near that same TNT plant, out in fields and around town. The descriptions were surprisingly consistent. 7 feet tall, grey or moth-colored, with a wingspan of 10 feet or more, and always those glowing red eyes. Witnesses were utterly terrified, describing a sense of paralysis, overwhelming dread, and even distorted time. The sheer number of independent witnesses convinced many that something very real was happening in Point Pleasant. This wave of weirdness attracted journalist John Keel. He arrived in Point Pleasant and ended up spending 13 months researching the phenomenon. His 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, documented the encounters and connected Mothman to UFOs, paranormal activity, and prophecies of disaster. Keel interviewed dozens of witnesses, collecting reports of everything from mysterious phone calls and electronic failures to men in black. He concluded the phenomenon was ultra-terrestrial, not from space or from Earth, but from another dimension. Keel's work launched Mothman from a local oddity into a global cultural phenomenon. His paranormal angle shaped how people saw their experiences, but it's important to remember Keel wasn't a skeptic. He was looking for a paranormal explanation. His book is a fascinating piece of cultural history, but it's definitely creative non-fiction, not a scientific investigation. Then, on December 15, 1967, during the 5 p.m. rush hour, the unthinkable happened. The Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed without any warning, plunging dozens of cars into the icy Ohio River. 46 people lost their lives in one of America's worst bridge disasters. Investigators later determined the cause was structural failure. A single corroded eye-bar in the suspension chain had snapped, and after the collapse, the Mothman sightings stopped. For some, this was proof. Mothman was a harbinger of doom, a warning of the tragedy to come. For others, Mothman was the cause. Skeptics, however, point out that the bridge's failure had clear engineering causes. Connecting it to a cryptid is just our brain trying to find patterns in unrelated events. The bridge had known design flaws and corrosion problems for years. Still, the link between Mothman and the bridge collapse became the core of the legend, transforming it into something far more ominous. So if it wasn't a supernatural entity, what could it have been? Ornithologists have a compelling theory: a misidentified sandhill crane. These are massive birds with a 7-foot wingspan that sometimes migrate through West Virginia. They stand about 4 feet tall, are grayish in color, and have distinct red patches of skin around their eyes. In poor light, especially with headlights hitting them, those red patches could easily appear to glow. Cranes can fly over 30 miles per hour, even faster with a tailwind, so one flying alongside a car could seem like it was pacing it, and the abandoned TNT area would have been a perfect habitat. This theory covers most of the physical descriptions without needing a monster. Of course, witnesses who knew local birds swore it wasn't a crane, and the 7-foot height description doesn't quite match. Still, the crane hypothesis is the most scientifically plausible explanation we have. Another bird theory points to the barn owl, specifically a rare dark-colored or melanistic one. Barn owls have huge reflective eyes that shine intensely in headlights. Their wingspan is about 3 feet, smaller than reported, but fear can easily make people exaggerate size. They fly silently, with a distinctive up and down motion, and their heart-shaped face can look incredibly unsettling in the dark. An owl startled by a car might fly alongside it for a moment. In a state of pure terror, a witness could easily distort the details. A 3-foot owl becomes a 7-foot monster. Plus, barn owls are nocturnal, which fits the nighttime encounters perfectly. But barn owls are common enough that you'd think locals would recognize them, even under stress. So the owl theory has its supporters, but also some pretty big holes. This brings us to a psychological explanation: mass hysteria or social contagion. After the first few reports hit the media, an expectation was created. People driving near the TNT plant at night were looking for Mothman. Any ambiguous shape, a bird, a shadow, a reflection, could be interpreted as the creature through a filter of fear and expectation. Mass hysteria doesn't mean people are lying. It means their perception is genuinely distorted by social and psychological pressure. We've seen this before with things like the phantom airship sightings of the 1890s. Point Pleasant was also an economically declining town under a lot of stress, which can make a community more susceptible to this kind of collective psychological event. In this view, Mothman was a manifestation of the town's underlying anxieties. Then there's the full-blown paranormal connection. Mothman quickly became associated with UFOs, strange phone calls, men in black, and even psychic premonitions. John Keel documented these connections extensively, suggesting Point Pleasant was a window area for high strangeness. Believers argue Mothman was an interdimensional being, linked to UFO intelligence or even a psychic projection. These theories leave biology behind entirely. From a skeptical perspective, this is just pattern seeking. UFO reports and weird phone calls happen everywhere. They only got linked to Mothman because people were primed to connect the dots. This paranormal framing makes the whole thing unfalsifiable. Any strange event can be added to the lore, and any lack of evidence is just proof of a cover-up, or that the creature has shifted back to its own dimension. Whatever it was, Mothman became Point Pleasant's most famous resident. The town has fully embraced the legend. They have the Mothman Museum, an annual Mothman festival, and a 12-foot-tall chrome statue of the creature. This cryptid tourism brings in money and has helped revitalize the local economy. The 2002 movie The Mothman Prophecies, starring Richard Gere, blasted the story into the mainstream. Today, Mothman is everywhere, in comics, TV shows, and video games. For Point Pleasant, Mothman transformed a tragedy into a unique identity and an economic opportunity. At this point, whether Mothman was real is almost secondary to its cultural and economic reality. What Mothman is matters less than what Mothman means. The claim that Mothman prophesied the bridge collapse is a classic example of confirmation bias. John Keel documented vague warnings about an impending disaster. It was only after the tragedy that these statements were reinterpreted as specific predictions. This is called retrofitting, giving ambiguous messages a precise meaning after the fact. We see it all the time, like with Nostradamus' predictions. Our brains are wired to find meaning in randomness, to connect the dots after the picture is already complete. Before the collapse, no one in Point Pleasant was expecting it, despite the bridge's known engineering problems. The prophecy narrative emerged later because it gave meaning to a terrifying random event. It offers a sense of control. If this was predicted, maybe future disasters can be too. So, what was Mothman? The most likely answer is a combination of things. Misidentified large birds like sandhill cranes or barn owls seen under stressful conditions. This was then amplified by media attention, social contagion, and very real human fear. The connection to the Silver Bridge collapse appears to be a powerful coincidence. There is zero physical evidence, no feathers, no body, not even a clear photograph. The paranormal elements tell us more about our human need to find meaning in chaos than they do about any objective reality. But Mothman's cultural reality is undeniable. It's a story of small-town trauma, collective experience, and the birth of modern folklore. Mothman shows us where cryptozoology can merge with the paranormal, where biological questions become existential ones. But not all cryptids remain mysteries. Some become incredible discoveries, transitioning from folklore to formal science. The giant squid, the mountain gorilla, and the okapi were all once considered cryptids. These success stories prove that serious investigation can pay off, and that skepticism shouldn't mean having a closed mind. Not all cryptids remain mysteries forever. Throughout history, animals first dismissed as myths or local folklore were eventually discovered and scientifically described. These incredible stories remind us that unknown species are out there, that local knowledge often outpaces Western science, and that the thrill of discovery is far from over. The line between myth and reality is sometimes crossed. These are the success stories, the cryptids that became real, proving that undiscovered creatures still inhabit our world. Until the early 1900s, mountain gorillas were just legends to the Western world. While indigenous African peoples knew of these great apes, European colonizers dismissed their accounts as tall tales. Then, in 1902, a German captain, Robert von Beringe, collected the first physical specimens in Rwanda. In 1903, the mountain gorilla was officially described. These magnificent animals, with males weighing up to 400 pounds, had evaded science despite living in relatively accessible mountains. This delay was largely due to colonial biases that ignored local knowledge. Once science finally took a serious look, the mountain gorilla became one of the most studied great apes on the planet, showing that even large mammals can stay hidden until we make a real effort to find them. We've talked about giant squid before, but their story is a classic. For centuries, sailors shared terrifying tales of the kraken, a massive tentacled beast said to attack ships. Scientists laughed it off as fantasy until the late 1800s, when giant squid carcasses started washing ashore. These dead specimens proved they were real, but seeing one alive was another story. It wasn't until 2004 that Japanese researchers finally captured the first photos of a live giant squid in its deep-sea home, with video following in 2006. These creatures can grow over 40 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates, so you can understand why sailors were so awestruck. The giant squid proves that spectacular animals can hide in our oceans, but also that real creatures eventually leave real evidence. Even more recently, the colossal squid was confirmed. Even bigger and rarer than the giant squid, it lurks in the deep freezing waters of the Antarctic. The first complete specimen wasn't captured until 2007, when New Zealand fishermen caught one that measured over 30 feet and weighed nearly 1,500 pounds. Before that, the only evidence we had were their hard, parrot-like beaks found inside the stomachs of sperm whales. The colossal squid was technically described in 1903 from fragments, but a full understanding only came in our lifetime. This shows that marine biology is still making huge discoveries, but these breakthroughs come from systematic research and physical evidence, not just speculation. The method is what matters. Meet the okapi, a stunning relative of the giraffe from the Democratic Republic of Congo, unknown to Western science until 1901. Indigenous peoples knew it well, but European explorers doubted its existence. It was British explorer Harry Johnston who finally collected specimens and gave it a scientific description. With zebra-like stripes on its legs, the okapi is actually closer to a giraffe, with males even having small horns. They live deep in the dense rainforest, and their shy nature kept them hidden from outsiders. The okapi's discovery shows that large mammals can remain undetected in remote forests, but once a serious effort was made to find it, evidence appeared quickly. This is a key difference between real discoveries and endless cryptid hunts. The coelacanth might be the most dramatic back-from-the-dead story in all of science. Known only from fossils, this ancient fish was thought to have gone extinct with the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Then, in December 1938, a South African museum curator named Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer spotted a bizarre fish in a local fisherman's catch. She contacted an expert, J.L.B. Smith, who identified it as a living coelacanth, a true living fossil. This discovery sent shockwaves through the world of biology. With its fleshy, lobed fins, it represents an evolutionary line older than the dinosaurs. A second species was even found in Indonesia in 1997. The coelacanth proves that major discoveries are still possible, but once it was found, the evidence piled up fast because the animal was real. As recently as 1992, biologists surveying a nature reserve in Vietnam found strange skulls with long, straight horns in local hunters' homes. This led to the discovery of a completely new species, the saola. This forest-dwelling relative of cattle was soon photographed by camera traps, confirming its existence. Saola are incredibly rare and elusive, living in the dense mountain forests on the Vietnam-Laos border. They're now critically endangered, with possibly fewer than 100 left. The saola's recent discovery proves large mammals can still be found, but it was discovered by trained biologists, working with local communities and collecting physical evidence, not by cryptid hunters chasing vague stories. This is how real science works. Komodo dragons, the world's largest lizards, can grow over 10 feet long and weigh 300 pounds. Yet they were unknown to Western science until the early 20th century. Indonesian islanders knew about these giant predators, but their tales were dismissed as exaggerations. In 1910, Dutch colonial administrators finally collected specimens from Komodo Island, and the species was formally described in 1912. These apex predators hunt large prey using a venomous bite. Their late discovery, despite their incredible size, shows how even spectacular animals can stay hidden in remote locations. But once investigators went looking for them specifically, they were found almost immediately. Targeted investigation gets results. In 1976, a US Navy vessel off Hawaii accidentally snagged a 14-foot shark unlike anything ever seen. It was the megamouth shark, a new species, genus, and family all in one, an incredibly rare event in modern science. Megamouths are filter feeders that live in the deep ocean and only surface at night, which is why they're so rarely seen. Fewer than 300 sightings have been recorded since its discovery. The megamouth proves that large marine species are still out there waiting to be found. But it was discovered by accident, not by a cryptozoologist. Since then, science has systematically gathered evidence from specimens caught as bycatch or stranded on beaches. This is the pattern of legitimate discovery: physical evidence, documentation, and ongoing research. Looking at these successful discoveries reveals a clear pattern. First, real animals leave physical evidence: bodies, bones, or clear photos. Second, discoveries are usually made by professional scientists doing systematic research. Third, indigenous or local knowledge is often the first clue. Fourth, while the animals live in remote places, they aren't impossible to find with the right effort. And finally, once discovered, the evidence multiplies quickly. These patterns help us separate plausible unknown species from pure fantasy. Cryptids that have no physical evidence after decades of searching are almost certainly just stories. So, what do these success stories teach us? Unquestionably, that unknown species exist and new discoveries are waiting to be made. But they also teach us that discovery requires rigorous science, not just wishful thinking. Physical evidence is king, and while we should listen to local knowledge, it needs to be backed up by proof. Most importantly, just because some cryptids turned out to be real doesn't mean they all will. The existence of the okapi doesn't prove Bigfoot is real. Each claim has to be judged on its own evidence. Success stories show us the value of open-minded skepticism. What might be discovered next? The most likely candidates are deep-sea creatures, small mammals in dense forests, new reptiles and amphibians, and countless insects. The age of discovering spectacular new megafauna has likely passed. Future discoveries will be scientifically important, but maybe less dramatic. Technology like environmental DNA, camera traps, and drones is making it easier to find new species. But it's a race against time, as habitat destruction might be wiping out unknown species even faster than we can find them. These success stories remind us that discovery is possible, but they also highlight why most famous cryptids remain unconfirmed. The difference is evidence. Real animals produce evidence. Famous cryptids produce stories. To understand why people keep searching for them, we need to dive into the psychology and culture behind cryptozoology itself. What drives this belief? Let's explore the science and psychology behind the hunt for hidden animals. Why are we so captivated by cryptids? Why do people spend their lives searching for creatures that likely don't exist? The answers aren't just in the wild, but within our own minds, our culture, and our very nature. Cryptozoology is this fascinating crossroads where science, folklore, belief, and hope all meet. To understand it, we need to look not just at the monsters, but at the people searching for them. What does this quest for the unknown truly reveal about us? Believing in cryptids does something for us psychologically. In a world where everything feels mapped and explained, it injects a dose of wonder and mystery. It gives people a sense of adventure, a purpose. Searching for a hidden creature can give life meaning. It also builds communities. Believers find each other, sharing an identity and experiences. Sometimes it's about pushing back against authority, questioning the scientific consensus. It fulfills our need for agency, the idea that we can discover something the experts missed. And it connects us back to that childhood magic, keeping imagination alive. These benefits are real, whether Bigfoot is or not. A powerful psychological force at play here is confirmation bias. That's our tendency to favor information that confirms what we already believe. In cryptozoology, this means a blurry photo is seen as proof, while a total lack of physical remains is easily explained away. Every strange sound in the woods confirms the belief, but no amount of silence can disprove it. Mainstream science has checks and balances against this, like peer review and replication. Cryptozoology often lacks these safeguards. This makes the field susceptible to confirmation bias, allowing false beliefs to persist because there's no built-in way to correct them. Our brains are hardwired for pattern recognition. It helped our ancestors survive. But this amazing ability has a side effect called pareidolia, seeing patterns that aren't really there. It's why we see faces in clouds or figures in the shadows. It's better to mistake a log for a crocodile than the other way around, right? Cryptozoology is filled with pareidolia. Ambiguous shapes in a grainy photo become monsters. Random noises become creature calls. The famous surgeon's photograph of Nessie, which fooled people for decades, was just a toy submarine. This doesn't mean we should dismiss everything, but it does mean we need to be extra critical of what we think we see. In our modern world, mystery is a dying breed. Satellites have mapped every inch of the globe, GPS knows our every move, and the internet has an answer for everything. This can feel like a loss. Cryptids fight back against this. If Bigfoot is out there, it means our world isn't completely documented and controlled. People crave that sense of the unknown. The irony is, the very technology that eliminates mystery like trail cams and eDNA should make finding cryptids easier if they exist. The fact that we are still searching suggests the belief is fueled more by our emotional need for mystery than by solid evidence. There's often a tension between indigenous knowledge and the Western scientific method. Indigenous cultures have an incredibly deep understanding of their environments, passed down through generations. When their traditions describe creatures unknown to science, how should we interpret that? Are they literal animals, spiritual beings, or metaphors? Some cryptozoologists cherry-pick the parts that support their theories, while some scientists dismiss it all as superstition. A more respectful approach recognizes that there are different ways of knowing the world. A cryptid might be real and meaningful within a cultural context, even if it doesn't fit into a zoological one. The media plays a huge role in shaping how we see cryptids. TV shows present monster hunting as serious investigation, but they're really made for entertainment. Every episode hypes up compelling evidence, but never delivers a body. Social media spreads supposed sightings in an instant, with no fact-checking. Algorithms push the most sensational stuff to the top, not the most accurate. This creates a constant stream of content that makes it seem like cryptids are everywhere, reinforcing belief without any real proof. In this environment, it's so important to be media literate and question what you're being shown. In science, the person making a claim has the burden of proof. If you say a cryptid exists, you have to provide the evidence. But in cryptozoology, this is often flipped. Believers will say, "You can't prove it doesn't exist." Well, you can't prove a lot of things don't exist. That's why the burden is on the claimant. After decades of searching for Bigfoot with no bones, no bodies, no clear DNA, that absence of evidence becomes pretty strong evidence of absence. This rule isn't meant to shut people down. It's a fundamental principle that protects science from becoming a free-for-all of untestable ideas. So, is cryptozoology a science? While it claims to be, it generally doesn't follow the scientific method. Science needs testable ideas, peer review, and a willingness to be proven wrong. Cryptozoology often relies on anecdotes and blurry photos. When evidence doesn't show up, theories are just adjusted. Bigfoot becomes smarter, more elusive. Nessie becomes rarer, harder to find. This makes the belief unfalsifiable. A true scientist abandons a hypothesis when the evidence contradicts it. This doesn't mean cryptozoologists aren't sincere. It just means the way they investigate can't reliably separate what's true from what isn't. The world of cryptozoology has two main groups, true believers and grifters. The true believers are genuinely curious, driven by a passion for discovery. The grifters are in it for profit, selling books, tours, and merchandise. They need the belief to continue because it's their source of income. This mix is toxic. Hoaxes from grifters damage the credibility of sincere researchers. The whole system rewards sensational claims over careful, honest investigation. It's a field that desperately needs ethical standards, but its amateur nature makes that incredibly difficult to enforce. For some places, cryptids are a core part of their cultural identity. Think of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the Mothman, or Loch Ness and Nessie. These legends bring in tourists, create a sense of local pride, and become part of the town's story. Questioning the creature can feel like an attack on the community itself. In these cases, belief isn't just about evidence, it's about identity, heritage, and belonging. Maybe the point isn't to prove or disprove the creature's biological existence, but to recognize that it can be culturally real and meaningful, and that has a value all its own. What is the future of cryptozoology? Technology is getting better and better. With camera traps, eDNA analysis, and drones, our ability to survey the wild is unprecedented. If large unknown animals are out there, we are more likely than ever to find them. This brings cryptozoology to a crossroads. Will it adopt rigorous scientific methods and accept the results, even if that means finding nothing? Or will it retreat further into the realm of unfalsifiable belief? Its future as a legitimate field depends on its willingness to say, "We searched, we found nothing, so it probably doesn't exist." Understanding the psychology and culture behind cryptozoology shows us why these stories persist, even with little to no evidence. The belief serves deep human needs. But that still doesn't answer the question, what are people actually seeing out there? Are there genuinely unexplained phenomena that deserve a closer look? As we near the end of our journey, let's think about what the future of this search could look like, and what discoveries, if any, might still be waiting for us. What does the future hold for cryptid hunting? As technology advances and the wilderness shrinks, will we finally find Bigfoot, or will rational explanation prevail? As we look forward, we must balance possibility against probability, hope against evidence, and wonder against reason. Technology is revolutionizing how we find and monitor species. Camera traps are constantly snapping photos in millions of locations. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, can detect an animal's presence from just a sample of water or soil, and it's getting cheaper and more sensitive every day. Drones survey vast terrains, satellites monitor habitats from space, and bioacoustic monitors listen for animal calls around the clock. Citizen science apps mobilize thousands of observers, and AI analyzes all this data at scales impossible for humans. This technological net is constantly tightening. If large unknown animals exist, their discovery seems more and more likely, not through some wild expedition, but through routine wildlife monitoring. But here's the flip side. The failure of all this tech to find any cryptids argues strongly against their existence. The space for large hidden animals to exist is shrinking to nearly zero. At the same time, the wilderness itself is disappearing. Deforestation, development, and climate change are wiping out habitats. Roads are cutting through once remote areas, and human presence is expanding everywhere. This has a few contradictory effects on the search for cryptids. On one hand, there are fewer places for large, unknown animals to hide. On the other, habitat loss might push them closer to us, making encounters more likely. But it could also mean they're going extinct before we ever find them. Maybe sightings are declining not because cryptids were never real, but because they're dying out. Conservationists point out that focusing on cryptids while known species vanish is a case of misplaced priorities. The money spent searching for Bigfoot could be used to protect actual endangered animals. In a world facing an environmental crisis, cryptid hunting can seem frivolous. Genetic technologies should be a game changer for cryptozoology. eDNA can identify species from the tiniest traces. We can test old museum specimens and analyze alleged cryptid samples like hair or tissue. But so far the results have been a consistent letdown for believers. Supposed Yeti samples turn out to be from bears. Alleged Bigfoot hairs are from deer or other known mammals. Mystery carcasses are just decomposed, ordinary animals. No eDNA survey has ever detected an unknown primate or a lake monster. Instead of discovering cryptids, genetic analysis has become a tool for debunking them. The future of this field depends on accepting this evidence honestly. When the DNA says it's a bear, not a government cover-up. As if that weren't enough, digital technology has made it easier than ever to create convincing hoaxes. Photo and video editing software can create incredibly realistic fakes. 3D printing can fabricate physical evidence like footprint casts. Even AI can now generate convincing photographs of things that never existed. With social media spreading these hoaxes at lightning speed, it's getting harder to tell genuine mysteries from fabrications. Cryptozoology has always struggled to weed out fakes, often embracing them until they're exposed. This creates a real catch-22. The rise of hoaxes means we have to be more skeptical, but too much skepticism might cause us to dismiss genuine evidence. The only way forward is with rigorous methodology and professional standards, or the field will drown in its own disinformation. Citizen science could be a powerful tool, mobilizing millions of observers to document nature. Apps like iNaturalist have created massive biodiversity databases, democratizing science and expanding what we can monitor. This model could revolutionize cryptozoology by crowdsourcing the search, but there's a catch. Citizen science works because it focuses on known species with clear identification criteria. Cryptozoology is ambiguous by nature. What exactly are we looking for? This makes it hard to crowdsource effectively. Plus, real citizen science projects are managed by professional scientists who ensure data quality. Cryptozoology lacks that kind of infrastructure. To leverage this model, it would need to develop clear protocols and professional oversight. Otherwise, it just amplifies noise and misidentification. Let's imagine for a second that we did discover a cryptid. What then? A whole host of ethical questions would pop up. Should we capture it for study or observe it from a distance? How do we protect it from hunters and exploitation? Who owns the discovery rights? The discovery of mountain gorillas brought scientific understanding and conservation, but also tourism that stresses the animals. A new species might be critically endangered, making any disturbance a potential catastrophe. We also have to consider the cultural impact. Proving the Yeti is a bear affects Sherpa traditions. Proving Nessie doesn't exist hurts Loch Ness tourism. A discovery isn't just a scientific achievement. It has real-world consequences that demand ethical consideration. Climate change is another huge factor. Shifting habitats might push cryptids into contact with humans, or species thought to be extinct might reappear. But it's far more likely that climate change will simply drive species to extinction faster. Known animals are already struggling to adapt, and any unknown species would face the same challenges. Climate change also complicates sightings. As ecosystems transform, people might see unfamiliar animals in unexpected places, like a tropical bird in a temperate zone, and report it as a cryptid instead of a climate refugee. The climate crisis really puts cryptozoology's relevance into perspective. Why search for undiscovered species when so many known ones desperately need our help to survive? As biological explanations fail time and again, we're seeing cryptozoology slide more and more toward the paranormal. Some researchers propose that cryptids are interdimensional beings, psychic projections, or even connected to aliens. This turn completely abandons scientific methodology. It might make believers feel better. If Bigfoot is interdimensional, that explains why we can't find a body. But it also makes the claims impossible to test and scientifically meaningless. The field is at a crossroads. It can either stick to biology and scientific methods or fully embrace the paranormal and give up any claim to scientific legitimacy. This middle ground it's trying to walk right now just isn't sustainable. So after all this, what have we really learned from cryptozoology? We've learned that unknown species do exist and will continue to be discovered, but they probably won't be giant monsters. We've learned that indigenous knowledge deserves respect, but also requires careful interpretation. We've learned that our own perceptions can be faulty, and that eyewitness testimony is unreliable on its own. We've seen how psychological and cultural factors drive belief, and how hoaxes and misinformation are everywhere, demanding critical thinking. Most of all, cryptozoology has taught us more about ourselves, our psychology, our culture, and our need for mystery, than it has about zoology. So what might we realistically discover in the future? The deep sea is our best bet. Its depths are still largely unexplored, and new species of fish, squid, and crustaceans are found regularly. Small mammals, reptiles, and amphibians in tropical rainforests are also good candidates. And there are certainly millions of undescribed insects out there. But large mammals, extremely unlikely, unless they're just subspecies of known animals in unexpected places. Genuine cryptids like Bigfoot or Nessie, which defy biological principles, almost certainly don't exist. The age of discovering spectacular monsters has likely passed, but the age of biological discovery is still going strong. Ultimately, what drives cryptozoology is hope. Hope that mystery survives in our modern world. Hope that the wilderness still holds secrets. This hope is psychologically valuable, even if cryptids don't exist. But hope must be balanced against evidence. False hope can be harmful, wasting resources that could go to protecting real endangered species or leading researchers on fruitless, career-long searches. It takes maturity and wisdom to balance our beautiful hope for wonder with the sometimes harsh reality of truth. The future of cryptid hunting remains uncertain. Technology could finally give us the answer, one way or another. Believers might finally accept the evidence, or they might retreat further into the unfalsifiable. Whatever happens, the phenomenon has taught us so much about science, culture, and our relationship with the unknown. We've journeyed through deep forests searching for Bigfoot, plumbed ocean depths seeking sea serpents, and climbed Himalayan peaks tracking the Yeti. We've explored the psychology, the culture, and the science of cryptozoology. We've seen success stories where cryptids became real, confirmed species, and failures where legends remained just that, legends. Now, as our exploration comes to an end, let's reflect on what these creatures truly mean, why they persist in our minds, and what they teach us about ourselves and our world. Let's be clear, the famous cryptids, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, almost certainly don't exist as they're described. After decades of searching with ever-improving technology, we have no bodies, no bones, no definitive DNA. The footprints, photos, and eyewitness accounts just aren't enough. The biological math doesn't add up either. A sustainable population needs food, space, and an evolutionary history that simply isn't there. More often than not, the real explanation is a misidentified animal, an elaborate hoax, or a trick of the mind. Science demands we be honest with ourselves. These cryptids are powerful myths, not biological realities. And while that truth might be disappointing, it's a truth we have to acknowledge. However, in the world of culture, cryptids are absolutely real. They thrive in our stories, our art, our festivals, and our collective imagination. They are symbols of the wild, a connection to a nature we feel we've lost. The Mothman is vital to the identity of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, whether it was a real creature or not. Nessie is a cornerstone of Scottish culture that goes far beyond zoology. For many indigenous peoples, creatures like the Thunderbird hold a sacred significance that scientific validation could never touch and might even diminish. Cultural reality is just as important as biological reality. Accepting this doesn't reduce these creatures. It allows us to see their true, powerful nature. Cryptids also hold up a mirror to our own human nature. Our brains are wired to see patterns, to create monsters from shadows and ambiguity. We have a deep psychological need to believe in something more, a desire for mystery in a world that feels overly explained. These shared stories strengthen our communities. Belief in cryptids can even be a quiet rebellion against scientific consensus. In a way, they give meaning to the meaningless, tapping into an ancient evolutionary caution that sees threats in the unknown. Cryptozoology isn't just about searching for monsters. It's a window into psychology, sociology, and how our own minds work. This is where skepticism comes in. It's often misunderstood as being closed-minded, but true skepticism is the opposite. It's being open to any possibility, but requiring solid evidence before you believe. It's what helps us sort fact from fiction, exposing hoaxes and honest mistakes. Skepticism is why we now accept the giant squid as real, once the evidence was undeniable, and why we still question Bigfoot. But skepticism needs humility. We don't know everything, and new species are discovered all the time. The best approach is a balance, keeping an open mind but also thinking critically. It's the dance between hope and realism, and at the heart of that hope is wonder. That thrilling feeling that our world still holds incredible mysteries, that something extraordinary could be just around the corner. Cryptids fuel that wonder. The mere possibility of Bigfoot hiding in some remote forest is exciting, even if it's unlikely. But we don't need to believe in falsehoods to find wonder. Reality is already overflowing with it. The alien intelligence of an octopus, the bizarre ecosystems thriving in the deepest parts of the ocean, the grand, sweeping story of evolution itself, these are all real, and they are all wondrous. Perhaps the enduring appeal of cryptids shows us we haven't been appreciating the magic of the world that's right in front of us. The persistence of these beliefs also reveals a failure in how science is communicated. Too often, Scientists dismiss believers with arrogance, which only builds walls and strengthens anti-science feelings. A better approach is to engage respectfully, to understand the psychological and cultural reasons people believe, and to explain the scientific process without talking down to anyone. We need to remember that people who believe in cryptids aren't foolish. They're responding to something deeply human. Science needs to celebrate its own genuine discoveries with passion, showing that it too embraces mystery and wonder, as long as it's backed by evidence. Truth is powerful, but it has to be told in a compelling way. This brings up a fascinating ethical question. Is it wrong to believe in things that aren't true? Believing in Bigfoot might bring someone joy, a sense of purpose, and a community. Where's the harm in that? Well, perhaps the resources spent chasing imaginary monsters could be used to protect real endangered species. Spreading misinformation can also harm scientific literacy, but forcing people to abandon comforting beliefs feels wrong too. The solution might be a form of self-aware belief. Feel free to find enrichment in the idea of Bigfoot, but acknowledge that it's a belief held on faith, not fact, and be mindful not to harm others with it. The ethics here might be less about absolute truth and more about simple honesty. So where does cryptozoology go from here? The choice is ours. Will it evolve, embracing rigorous scientific methods and contributing to our knowledge of biodiversity? Or will it retreat further into pure speculation and pseudoscience? Will it respect indigenous cultures or exploit their stories? The potential for a legitimate field of study is there, especially in underexplored parts of the world. But to get there, it needs a transformation, professionalism, rigor, and intellectual honesty. The future isn't set in stone. It will be built by the choices we make today. But what if, after all that, we're wrong? What if Bigfoot really is out there, impossibly elusive? Science has to leave that door open, however slightly. That is the strength of the scientific method. It changes its conclusions when the evidence demands it. If a living, breathing Bigfoot were found tomorrow, scientists would be the first to celebrate. This possibility is what keeps things interesting, but it doesn't justify belief without evidence. Until then, skepticism is the right call. But we should remain humble, because the difference between science and dogma is the willingness to be proven wrong. And with that, thank you. Thank you for joining this journey through legend and truth. Thank you to the searchers who chase mystery with such passion, to the scientists who hold the line for evidence, and to the storytellers who keep wonder alive. Whether cryptids are real or not, they have shown us so much about who we are, and that might just be the greatest discovery of all. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this exploration, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the unknown.